Sarah pressed her ear to the bedroom door and listened to the intruder moving through her house. They seemed to know exactly where to step to avoid the loudest creaks. This was not some random burglar stumbling around in the dark. Someone had been inside this house before. The realization sent ice through her veins. Sarah thought about the real estate agent's nervous energy when showing the property. He had rushed through the tour, avoiding certain rooms and changing the subject when she asked about the house's history. The price had been suspiciously low for 40 acres and a solid structure, even accounting for needed repairs. Heavy footsteps returned to the hallway outside her door. The intruder tested the handle again, then pressed harder against the wood. The dresser scraped slightly across the floor. Sarah backed toward the window, bat raised. Then she heard something that stopped her cold. A woman's voice, weak and muffled, calling for help from somewhere below. The sound was barely audible over the storm, but unmistakably human. Someone else was in the house, someone in distress. Sarah's mind raced. Was this a trap? Or was there really another victim who needed help? The intruder in the hallway had stopped moving, apparently listening to the same sounds. The woman's voice came again, more urgent this time. She seemed to be calling a name, but Sarah could not make out the words. The voice had a desperate quality that cut through Sarah's fear and awakened her protective instincts. Against every survival instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Sarah moved the dresser away from the door. She gripped the bat with sweaty palms and slowly turned the handle. The hallway was empty, but she could see wet footprints on the wooden floor leading toward the back stairs. Sarah followed the trail, her flashlight beam revealing more details about her uninvited guest. The footprints were large, definitely made by boots. Mud and dead leaves had been tracked throughout her house. Most disturbing were the red stains mixed with the mud, stains that looked suspiciously like blood. The woman's voice called out again, and this time Sarah could tell it was coming from the basement. She had not yet explored that part of the house. The real estate agent had mentioned some flooding issues and recommended she wait for drier weather before investigating below. Sarah found the basement door standing open. Steep wooden steps disappeared into absolute darkness. The smell rising from below was musty and foul, like something had been rotting in stagnant water. She aimed her flashlight down the stairs but could only see the first few steps. The woman called for help again. Her voice was definitely coming from the basement, and she sounded terrified. Sarah knew she should wait for help, should try to get to her car and drive for assistance. But the nearest neighbor was miles away, and in this storm, who knew if anyone would even answer their door for a stranger? Sarah started down the basement stairs, testing each step carefully. The wooden boards were slick with moisture and felt soft in places, as if they might give way under her weight. The smell grew stronger as she descended, not just mold and dampness, but something else. Something dead. At the bottom of the stairs, Sarah's flashlight revealed a partially flooded basement with stone walls and a dirt floor. Water stood several inches deep across most of the space, reflecting her light in dark, oily patterns. Old furniture and boxes were stacked on pallets to keep them dry. The woman's voice came from the far corner, behind a wall of stored belongings. Sarah waded through the murky water, trying not to think about what might be floating in it. Her bare feet touched soft things that squished and moved away. As she rounded a stack of boxes, Sarah's flashlight illuminated a sight that nearly made her drop the bat. A woman was chained to the stone wall, her wrists raw and bleeding from metal shackles. She was young, maybe 25, with long dark hair matted with dirt and dried blood. Her clothes were torn and filthy, and she looked like she had not eaten in days. The woman squinted in the flashlight beam, then began crying with relief. "Please help me," she whispered. "He's been keeping me here for weeks. I think he's coming back." Sarah rushed forward, examining the chains. They were old, but solid, secured to iron rings that had been driven deep into the stone wall. The locks looked antique but functional. "Who did this to you? How long have you been here?" "I don't know his name," the woman gasped. "He grabbed me from the parking lot at work, said this place belonged to his family, that no one would ever find me here. He comes down every few days with water and food, but lately," she shuddered, Lately he's been talking about ending it, about not wanting witnesses. Sarah examined the locks more closely. They were old-fashioned padlocks, the kind that might open with bolt cutters or a heavy hammer, but she had neither tool available. "I'm going to get you out of here," she promised. "But first I need to find something to break these chains." The woman grabbed Sarah's arm with desperate strength. "Don't leave me. He's still here. I heard him moving around upstairs. If he finds you, he'll chain you up too, or worse." Sarah's blood went cold. She had assumed the intruder was a burglar who would flee when discovered, but this was something far more sinister. Someone had been using her new house as a prison, possibly for years. The real estate agent had to have known something was wrong with the property. Above them, the basement door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor, and Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across the door. They were trapped. The woman began sobbing. "He knows you're here now. He's sealing us in. Sometimes he leaves me down here for days without coming back." Sarah forced herself to think clearly despite the rising panic. There had to be another way out of the basement. Old houses often had exterior cellar doors or other access points. She began exploring the walls with her flashlight, looking for any opening. In the back corner, she found what she was looking for: a narrow window set high in the stone wall, partially obscured by decades of grime and spider webs. It was small, maybe large enough for one person to squeeze through if they could reach it, but the window was at least 8 feet off the ground, and Sarah could see it was secured from the outside. Even if she could break the glass, she would need something to stand on and tools to clear the frame. The woman watched Sarah's exploration with growing hope. "Is there a way out? Please tell me you found something." Before Sarah could answer, they heard new sounds from upstairs. More footsteps, but these were different. Lighter, more careful. Someone else had entered the house. The woman's eyes widened with terror. "He has friends. Sometimes more than one person comes. They talk about other places, other women." She began pulling at her chains frantically. "You have to hide. If they find you free, they'll hurt you worse than me." Sarah listened to the movement above. The new footsteps were definitely different from the heavy boots that had been stalking through her house. These moved with purpose, as if the person knew exactly where to go. Then they heard something unexpected. A male voice speaking in a language Sarah did not recognize. The words had a rhythmic quality, almost like a chant or prayer. The voice was calm and controlled, completely different from what she would expect from the woman's captor. The chanting continued for several minutes, moving from room to room above them. Then everything went silent. Even the storm seemed to quiet, as if nature itself was listening. Sarah and the chained woman waited in the darkness, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then they heard the furniture being moved away from the basement door. Slow footsteps began descending the stairs. Sarah gripped her baseball bat and positioned herself behind a stack of boxes, motioning for the chained woman to stay quiet. The footsteps on the basement stairs were deliberate and unhurried, completely different from the heavy boots that had stalked through the house earlier. A beam of light appeared at the bottom of the stairs, much stronger than Sarah's small flashlight. The person carrying it swept the beam methodically across the flooded basement, examining every corner. When the light found the chained woman, it paused but did not linger. The searcher seemed to already know she was there. The footsteps moved through the shallow water, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of the newcomer. He was a tall man with long black hair tied back in a traditional style. His clothing was practical but bore distinctive patterns that Sarah recognized as Native American. Most striking were his eyes, dark and intense, scanning the basement with the practiced gaze of someone accustomed to tracking prey. He moved directly to the chained woman, speaking in a low voice. "How long have you been here?" The woman stared at him in confusion and fear. "Who are you? Are you with him?" The man knelt beside her, examining the chains. "I am not with the one who did this. My name is Joseph Walkingstick. I've been tracking him for 3 weeks." He pulled a small tool from his belt and began working on the locks. "Where is the man who chained you here?" "I don't know," the woman whispered. "A few minutes ago, we heard him moving around upstairs, then someone else came in. We thought it was his partner." Joseph's hand stilled on the lock. "Someone else is here?" Sarah realized she had to make a choice. This man seemed to be trying to help the prisoner, but she still knew nothing about him or his intentions. The smart thing would be to stay hidden until she understood the situation better. But something about his calm demeanor and direct questions suggested he was not part of whatever evil had been happening in this house. She stepped out from behind the boxes, bat still raised. "I'm here. This is my house. I just moved in today." Joseph turned toward her, and Sarah saw no surprise in his expression. His dark eyes studied her for a moment, then he nodded slightly. "You chose a dangerous place to call home. This house has been feeding evil for many years." The way he spoke sent chills down Sarah's spine. His words carried weight, as if he knew secrets about this property that others had tried to hide. "What do you mean? What's been happening here?" Joseph turned back to the locks, his tools clicking softly against the metal. "The man who has been using this place is named Dale Hutchins. He's been taking women for over 5 years, keeping them in basements and abandoned buildings across 3 counties. The authorities have never been able to catch him because he moves frequently and covers his tracks well." The first lock clicked open, and the chained woman gasped with relief as one shackle fell away. Joseph moved to the second lock. "But Hutchins made a mistake 3 weeks ago. He took a girl from the Cherokee reservation. Her grandmother came to me for help." Sarah lowered her bat slightly. "You're some kind of tracker?" "Among other things." Joseph's voice carried a hint of something darker. "My people have traditional ways of dealing with those who prey on the innocent. Ways that don't require courts or judges." The second lock opened, and the woman collapsed forward as her arms were finally freed. Joseph caught her gently, helping her stand on unsteady legs. "Can you walk?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. I thought I was going to die here." Joseph handed her his flashlight and turned to Sarah. "We need to leave this place immediately. Hutchins will return, and when he does, he'll be more dangerous than before. Men like him become unpredictable when their hunting grounds are discovered." Sarah thought about all her belongings upstairs, her entire life packed into boxes throughout the house. "I can't just leave everything. This is all I have." "Your possessions won't matter if you're dead," Joseph said bluntly. "Hutchins has killed before. The only reason he kept her alive," he gestured to the rescued woman, "was because he enjoys the fear. But he's growing tired of this game." As if summoned by their conversation, they heard the sound of a vehicle approaching outside. Headlight beams swept across the basement window, and gravel crunched under heavy tires. A truck door slammed, followed by the sound of boots on the front porch. Joseph's expression hardened. "He's back. Is there another way out of this basement?" Sarah pointed to the small window. "Only that, but it's too high and probably locked from outside." Joseph studied the window, then looked around the basement. "Help me move this table under the window." Together, they dragged a wooden table through the water and positioned it below the opening. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor above them, moving with purpose toward the basement door. Joseph climbed onto the table and examined the window frame. "The latch is rusted, but I can break it." He pulled a knife from his belt and began working on the metal. The basement door opened, and Dale Hutchins' voice echoed down the stairs. "I know you're down there, Cherokee. Saw your truck parked down the road. You made a big mistake coming here alone." Joseph continued working on the window, his movements calm and efficient despite the threat above. "When I get this open, the woman goes first, then you, then me." Sarah helped support the rescued woman, who was weak from weeks of captivity. "What about you? How will you get out if you're last?" Joseph's knife snapped the rusted latch, and he pushed the window open. Cool air rushed into the stale basement. "Don't worry about me. I have other business with Hutchins." Footsteps began descending the basement stairs, accompanied by the beam of a powerful flashlight. Sarah could see the outline of a large man with a rifle in his hands. "I've got you trapped down there," Hutchins called out. "Might as well come up with your hands where I can see them. Maybe we can work something out." Joseph lifted the rescued woman onto the table. She was just tall enough to reach the window opening with his help. "Climb through and run for the trees. Don't stop until you reach the road, then flag down any vehicle you see." The woman hesitated. "What about you two?" "We'll be right behind you," Sarah lied, knowing someone needed to delay Hutchins long enough for the woman to escape. The woman squeezed through the narrow window opening just as Hutchins reached the bottom of the stairs. His flashlight beam swept across the basement, finding Sarah and Joseph standing by the table. Well, Hutchins said, raising his rifle. Look what we have here. The new homeowner in the Cherokee tracker. You folks have caused me a lot of trouble tonight. Sarah noticed something different about Hutchins now that she could see him clearly. His clothes were covered in mud and what looked like fresh blood. His eyes had a wild, desperate quality that suggested he was beyond reasoning. Joseph stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the rifle. Let the woman go, Hutchins. Your business is with me. Hutchins laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. My business was keeping my collection safe and hidden. Now I've got to clean up a mess and find a new location. But first I'm going to make you pay for interfering with my work. The rifle barrel swung toward Joseph, and Sarah realized she was about to witness something terrible. But Joseph seemed unnaturally calm, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Your hunting days are over, Joseph said quietly. One way or another, you won't be taking any more women. Sarah saw something flicker in Joseph's dark eyes, something that reminded her of a predator sizing up its prey. Despite being unarmed and facing a rifle, he looked completely confident. Hutchins must have seen it too, because his finger tightened on the trigger. Big words for a dead man. The basement fell silent except for the steady drip of water and the distant rumble of thunder. Dale Hutchins held his rifle trained on Joseph, but something in the Cherokee man's stillness seemed to unnerve him. Sarah pressed herself against the stone wall, her baseball bat forgotten in her trembling hands. Joseph began speaking in his native language, his voice low and rhythmic. The words seemed to fill the basement with an electric tension that made the hair on Sarah's arm stand up. Hutchins shifted nervously, his grip tightening on the weapon. Shut up with that witch doctor nonsense, Hutchins snarled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. I don't believe in any of that Indian mumbo-jumbo. Joseph continued his chant, taking a slow step forward. The flashlight beam wavered as Hutchins' hands began to shake slightly. I said shut up! But Joseph didn't stop. His words grew more intense, and Sarah could swear the temperature in the basement was dropping. Her breath began to mist in the suddenly frigid air. Even more unsettling, the standing water around their feet had stopped moving, as if it had frozen solid. Hutchins fired the rifle. The blast was deafening in the confined space, but Joseph had moved at the exact moment Hutchins pulled the trigger. The Cherokee man rolled to the side, and the bullet sparked off the stone wall where he had been standing. Before Hutchins could work the bolt action for another shot, Joseph was moving again. Sarah had never seen anyone move so fast. Joseph seemed to flow through the darkness like water, using the shadows and stored furniture for cover. Hutchins swung his flashlight frantically, trying to track his target, but Joseph had vanished completely. Where are you? Hutchins shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Come out and face me like a man. Joseph's voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. You want to know about Cherokee justice, Hutchins? Let me show you. The lights went out. Both flashlight beams died simultaneously, plunging the basement into absolute darkness. Sarah heard Hutchins stumbling through the water, cursing and firing blindly. Muzzle flashes lit the basement in strobing glimpses, but revealed nothing except empty water and floating debris. Then the real terror began. Sarah heard sounds that made no sense. Animal growls echoed from corners where no animals could be. The sound of claws scraping against stone came from the walls themselves. Most disturbing was a low howling that seemed to rise from the flooded floor, as if something was calling from deep underground. Hutchins fired his rifle until it clicked empty. Then Sarah heard him fumbling with ammunition. His breathing was ragged with fear. What's happening? What did you do? Joseph's voice answered from directly behind him. I called on spirits that remember this land before your people came. They remember what was taken, what was destroyed, and they hunger for justice. Sarah felt something brush past her in the darkness, something that moved with predatory grace. The air around her seemed alive with presence, as if invisible watchers surrounded them all. She pressed herself harder against the wall, trying to become as small as possible. Hutchins screamed. The sound was raw terror, unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. It was followed by splashing and thrashing, as if Hutchins was fighting something in the water. But Sarah could see nothing in the absolute darkness. Please, Hutchins sobbed. I'll stop. I'll turn myself in. Just make it stop. Joseph's voice was implacable. Tell me about the other women. How many have you killed? I don't know. Maybe 8, maybe 10. I lost count. Where are their bodies? Different places. Woods, old mines, abandoned wells. I can show you. Just please make them go away. Sarah realized that Joseph was extracting a confession, using whatever supernatural forces he had summoned to break Hutchins' will. The sounds of struggle continued in the darkness, punctuated by Hutchins' increasingly desperate pleas. Then abruptly, everything went quiet. Sarah waited in the silence, afraid to move or speak. Minutes passed with no sound except the dripping water and her own thundering heartbeat. Finally, she whispered, "Joseph, are you there?" A flashlight beam clicked on, revealing Joseph standing calmly in the center of the basement. He appeared completely unharmed, his clothes dry despite the struggle that had just taken place. "Hutchins was nowhere to be seen. Where is he?" Sarah asked, looking around the empty basement. Joseph's expression was unreadable. "Gone. The spirits took him to face judgment in their realm. He won't be hurting anyone else." Sarah stared at the spot where Hutchins had been standing moments before. The water showed no sign of disturbance, no evidence that a struggle had taken place. It was as if Dale Hutchins had simply vanished from existence. "I don't understand what just happened," Sarah said slowly. "None of this makes sense." Joseph began walking toward the stairs. "Some things don't need to make sense to be true. Your rational mind wants explanations, but some forces exist beyond human understanding." Sarah followed him, her legs shaky with delayed shock. "But what do I tell the police? How do I explain what happened here?" "The woman we rescued will tell them about her captivity. They'll find evidence of Hutchins' crimes throughout this house." As for his disappearance, Joseph shrugged. "Men like him often flee when their crimes are discovered. The authorities will assume he escaped." They climbed the stairs into Sarah's dark kitchen. Through the windows, she could see that the storm was finally beginning to clear. The first pale light of dawn was visible on the horizon. Joseph moved through the house with practiced efficiency, examining the rooms with his flashlight. In the living room, he found a large duffel bag filled with rope, duct tape, and other restraints. Hidden behind a loose board in the pantry, he discovered detailed notes about dozens of women, including photographs and personal information. "Hutchins had been planning to use your house as his new base of operations," Joseph explained. "He probably arranged for you to buy it, maybe through connections with the real estate agent. You were supposed to be his next victim, but you arrived earlier than expected." Sarah felt sick as the full horror of her situation became clear. "He was going to kidnap me from my own home. The spirits guided me here tonight," Joseph said. "They knew what was supposed to happen and wanted to prevent it." As dawn broke fully, they heard sirens in the distance. The rescued woman had made it to the road and flagged down help. Soon the property would be swarming with police, investigators, and reporters. Joseph gathered the evidence bags and prepared to leave. "The authorities will want to question you extensively. Tell them everything that happened before I arrived. Don't mention the spirits or how Hutchins disappeared. Just say he fled when the police sirens approached." Sarah watched him prepare to go. "Will I see you again? I still have so many questions." Joseph paused at the door, studying her face in the morning light. "This house holds dark memories now. You might want to consider finding somewhere else to live. But I put everything I had into this place. I don't have anywhere else to go." Joseph's expression softened slightly. "The evil is gone now. The spirits cleansed this place when they took Hutchins. If you choose to stay, you won't be alone. The Cherokee have long memories, and we protect those who help our people." He handed her a small carved stone. "Keep this. If you're ever in real danger, hold it and call my name. I'll come." Before Sarah could respond, Joseph disappeared into the morning mist, leaving her alone with the approaching sirens and the promise of a very long day of questions she wasn't sure how to answer. The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews, crime scene investigators, and news reporters. Sarah's quiet new life had become the center of a media storm about a serial killer's lair discovered in rural Tennessee. The rescued woman, whose name was Lisa Chen, had provided detailed testimony about her weeks of captivity and the crimes Dale Hutchins had confessed to committing. Detective Mary Rodriguez, the lead investigator, sat across from Sarah in her living room for the third time that week. The house still smelled of fingerprint powder and chemical testing agents. "I have to ask again, Ms. Mitchell. You're absolutely certain that Hutchins fled the scene when he heard our sirens approaching?" Sarah fingered the carved stone Joseph had given her, hidden in her pocket. "Yes, that's what happened. He ran up the stairs and out the back door when he heard the police coming." Detective Rodriguez made notes in her file. It's just unusual. We've had tracking dogs and helicopters searching the area for 3 days. A man on foot shouldn't be able to disappear so completely in familiar territory. Maybe he had a vehicle hidden somewhere, Sarah suggested, using the same explanation she had given multiple times. Maybe. The detective didn't sound convinced. What can you tell me about the man who helped rescue Ms. Chen? Joseph Walkingstick? Sarah's heart rate quickened. I only met him that night. He said he was tracking Hutchins. We've been trying to locate Mr. Walkingstick for follow-up questions, but he seems to have vanished as completely as Hutchins. No one by that name is registered with any Cherokee tribal authority. No vehicle registration, no address, no employment history. Sarah kept her expression neutral. He seemed to know what he was doing. Maybe he works with some kind of unofficial search and rescue organization. Detective Rodriguez closed her file and stood up. Well, Ms. Mitchell, you're free to go about your normal business. We'll contact you if we need any additional information. I'd recommend getting some good locks installed and maybe a security system, given what happened here. After the detective left, Sarah walked through her house in the afternoon quiet. The investigators had removed Hutchins' hidden equipment and notes, but they had left behind an atmosphere of violation that made every room feel contaminated. She had been cleaning and organizing for days, trying to reclaim her space, but the memories of that night lingered in every shadow. The basement had been sealed off as an ongoing crime scene. Police tape blocked the stairs, and Sarah was forbidden from entering until the investigation concluded. She was grateful for the restriction. She had no desire to return to that place of horror. As evening approached, Sarah found herself drawn to the front porch. The storm had cleared the air, and the sunset painted the surrounding hills in shades of gold and purple. For the first time since moving in, she could appreciate the natural beauty that had originally attracted her to this property. She was surprised to see a figure walking up her long driveway. As the person drew closer, Sarah recognized Lisa Chen, the woman they had rescued from the basement. Lisa looked healthier than she had that night, but she still moved with the careful manner of someone recovering from trauma. I hope you don't mind me coming here, Lisa said as she approached the porch. I needed to see this place in daylight to convince myself it was real. Sarah invited her to sit on the porch swing. How are you doing? The police told me you were staying with relatives. I'm getting better. Therapy helps, and my family is taking good care of me. Lisa stared out at the peaceful landscape. It's hard to believe such terrible things happened in such a beautiful place. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Finally, Lisa spoke again. I wanted to thank you properly. If you hadn't been here that night, if you hadn't been brave enough to come down to the basement, Joseph is the one who saved you. I just happened to be in the right place. Lisa turned to study Sarah's face. About Joseph. The police have been asking me questions about him too. They seem to think there's something strange about how he appeared and disappeared. Sarah chose her words carefully. What do you remember about him? Everything, Lisa said firmly. I remember exactly what happened in that basement. The police think I might be confused because of trauma, but I know what I saw. She lowered her voice. He did something to Hutchins, didn't he? Something the police wouldn't believe? Sarah met Lisa's eyes and saw understanding there. What do you think happened? I think Joseph Walkingstick is not an ordinary man. I think he has abilities that most people would find impossible to accept. Lisa pulled a small object from her pocket, another carved stone, similar to the one Joseph had given Sarah. He left this on my hospital bedside table. No one saw him come or go. Sarah pulled out her own stone, comparing it to Lisa's. The carvings were different but clearly made by the same hand. He told me to call his name if I was ever in danger. Me too. Lisa smiled for the first time since arriving. I've been researching Cherokee traditions and legends. There are stories about special warriors who protect the innocent and hunt those who prey on others. They're called night hunters, and they supposedly have powers that come from ancient spirits. Sarah thought about the supernatural events she had witnessed in the basement. Do you believe those stories? After what I experienced, I believe anything is possible. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? Before Sarah could answer, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. 2 black SUVs came up the driveway, followed by a sedan with government plates. Men in suits emerged from the vehicles, moving with the efficient manner of federal agents. The lead agent approached the porch, showing his credentials. Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Chen, I'm Agent Williams with the FBI. We need to speak with you about the Joseph walking stick case. Sarah's stomach clenched. What about him? We have reason to believe that the man you encountered is connected to several other disappearances of wanted criminals across the Southeast. We'd like you to come with us for a more detailed interview. Lisa stood up, her hand instinctively going to her pocket where the carved stone was hidden. Are we under arrest? Not at all, but we believe you both may have witnessed something significant and we need to understand exactly what happened here. Agent Williams gestured toward the vehicles. This shouldn't take long. We just want to get a clearer picture of events. Sarah looked at Lisa, then at the federal agents waiting by their cars. Something about the situation felt wrong. These men had arrived too quickly, as if they had been monitoring the property. Their questions seemed focused specifically on Joseph, rather than the broader investigation into Hutchins' crimes. Can we see your warrant? Sarah asked. Agent Williams smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. As I said, you're not under arrest, but we strongly encourage your cooperation. This is a matter of national security. Lisa stepped closer to Sarah. National security? We're talking about a man who helped rescue me from a kidnapper. That's part of what we need to discuss, Agent Williams replied. There are aspects of this case that go beyond local law enforcement capabilities. Sarah felt the carved stone growing warm in her pocket. Instinctively, she gripped it tighter and thought of Joseph's name. She didn't know if his promise was real, but something told her they were going to need help very soon. Agent Williams was growing impatient. Ladies, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, you're coming with us for questioning. That's when Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. None of the agents were wearing standard FBI identification. Their badges looked authentic, but there were subtle differences in the design. More troubling, she could see weapons concealed under their suits, and their body language suggested they were prepared to use force. I don't think these are real federal agents, Sarah whispered to Lisa. Lisa had noticed the same things. What do we do? Before either could answer, Agent Williams stepped onto the porch. Enough discussion. You're both coming with us now. As his hand reached for Sarah's arm, she squeezed the carved stone and silently called Joseph's name with all the desperation she could muster. The moment Agent Williams's hand touched Sarah's arm, the temperature around the porch dropped 20 degrees. The false agent jerked his hand back with a startled curse, staring at frost that had formed on his fingers in the humid Tennessee evening. Lisa backed toward the front door, her own carved stone growing warm in her hand. Sarah, something's happening. The other men in suits had noticed the sudden temperature change and were reaching for their concealed weapons. But before any of them could draw, shadows began moving independently of their sources. Darkness flowed across the ground like spilled ink, and the approaching night seemed to arrive hours ahead of schedule. Agent Williams tried to maintain his authoritative demeanor. Whatever trick you ladies are pulling, it won't work. We have orders to bring you in, and that's exactly what's going to happen. His words were interrupted by the sound of wind chimes, though there were no chimes anywhere on Sarah's property. The musical tones came from the forest surrounding the house, growing louder and more complex until they formed an almost hypnotic melody. The fake agents looked around nervously, their weapons now openly displayed. What is this? One of them demanded. Some kind of sound system? Joseph Walkingstick stepped out of the shadows between two parked vehicles, though Sarah was certain he hadn't been there moments before. He moved with the same fluid grace she remembered, but now there was something distinctly predatory in his bearing. His dark eyes reflected the porch light like an animal's. You men are trespassing on protected ground, Joseph said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard despite its quiet tone. Leave now and no harm will come to you. Agent Williams laughed harshly and raised his pistol. I don't know who you think you are, but you're interfering with federal business. Show me your credentials, Joseph replied, still walking slowly toward the porch. Real credentials, not the forgeries you're carrying. The lead agent's face tightened. We don't answer to some Indian playing dress-up. Take him down. The other men raised their weapons, but before anyone could fire, the wind chimes grew thunderously loud. The sound seemed to come from inside the agents' heads, making them stumble and grab their ears. Their formation scattered as each man struggled with the disorienting noise. Joseph continued his approach, unaffected by the supernatural cacophony. As he drew closer, Sarah could see that his appearance had changed subtly. His features seemed sharper, more angular, and his skin had a faint luminescence that made him look otherworldly. "You work for Hutchins' organization," Joseph said, his words somehow audible over the wind chimes. He was just one piece of a larger network. "When he disappeared, you came to silence the witnesses." Agent Williams tried to aim his pistol, but his hands were shaking too badly from the disorienting sound. "Shut up. We're federal agents investigating a crime." "You're criminals covering up your own activities," Joseph corrected. "The real FBI closed this case yesterday when they found Hutchins' body in a river 50 miles from here. His death was ruled accidental drowning during his escape." Sarah stared at Joseph in shock. Hutchins' body had been found? But she had seen him vanish into thin air in the basement. How was that possible? Joseph seemed to read her thoughts. Spirits work in mysterious ways. They delivered justice and provided evidence that would satisfy human authorities. The wind chimes reached a crescendo, then abruptly stopped. In the sudden silence, 2 of the fake agents had collapsed unconscious. The others were struggling to stay upright, blood trickling from their ears. "Last chance," Joseph told the remaining men. "Leave this place and never return. Forget about these women. Forget about this entire operation." Agent Williams wiped blood from his nose and tried once more to raise his weapon. "Go to hell." Joseph's expression grew cold. "As you wish." He raised his hand, and every electronic device the agents carried began sparking and smoking. Cell phones, radios, GPS units, even their car batteries started overheating and failing. The smell of burning circuits filled the air. More disturbing, the agents themselves began experiencing the same effect. Their watches stopped working. Their jewelry grew hot, and any metal objects they carried became too hot to touch. It was as if Joseph was generating an electromagnetic field that interfered with anything technological. "What are you?" Agent Williams gasped, dropping his now useless pistol. "I am what happens when your kind pushes too far," Joseph replied. "There are older laws than the ones you hide behind, older justice than your corrupt courts." The unconscious agents began to stir, but their faces showed no recognition of their surroundings. They looked around with the confused expressions of people who had no memory of how they had gotten there. Joseph walked among the disoriented men, speaking quietly to each one. Sarah couldn't hear his words, but whatever he said seemed to calm them. One by one, they wandered back to their vehicles with blank, peaceful expressions. Agent Williams was the last to succumb to whatever influence Joseph was exerting. He fought it longer than the others, maintaining his hostile glare even as his grip on consciousness weakened. "This isn't over," Williams mumbled as his eyes grew unfocused. "There are others. The network is bigger than you know." "I know exactly how big it is," Joseph said calmly. "And I've been dismantling it piece by piece for the past 5 years. Your people just don't realize it yet because you keep disappearing." Williams tried to say something else, but the words came out as meaningless sounds. His expression went blank, and he shuffled toward his vehicle like a sleepwalker. Within minutes, all 3 vehicles had departed, their drivers presumably having no memory of why they had come to Sarah's property. Joseph watched until their taillights disappeared down the dark road. Sarah and Lisa emerged from the porch, both still clutching their carved stones. "What did you do to them?" Sarah asked. "Showed them mercy," Joseph replied. "I could have done much worse. Men who traffic in human suffering deserve no compassion, but taking lives unnecessarily creates imbalance." Lisa studied Joseph's face in the porch light. "You're not entirely human, are you?" Joseph smiled, and for a moment he looked completely ordinary again. "I'm as human as anyone, but I carry the gifts and responsibilities of my ancestors. Some would call it magic. I prefer to think of it as justice that operates by different rules." "How did you know they were coming?" Sarah asked. "The spirits watch over those under their protection. When danger approaches, they send warnings." Joseph gestured toward the forest. "This land remembers everything that happens on it. The Cherokee lived here for centuries before the white settlers came. Our connection to this place runs deeper than legal ownership." Sarah looked around her property with new understanding. "Is that why Hutchins chose this house? Did he know about the spiritual significance? Men like Hutchins are drawn to places of power, even if they don't understand why. They sense the energy and try to corrupt it for their own purposes." Joseph's expression grew serious. "But you've changed that now. Your presence here, and the justice that was served, has cleansed this land of its recent darkness." Lisa held up her carved stone. "What are these for?" "You said to call your name if we needed help." "Insurance," Joseph explained. The organization Williams represented is larger than most people realize. They traffic women across multiple states using corruption and intimidation to avoid prosecution. You two represent loose ends they'll want to tie up. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with supernatural phenomena. You mean they'll come back? Different people, different approaches, but yes. They'll try again. Joseph's voice was reassuring despite his words. But you won't face them alone. The stones connect you to protective spirits. As long as you carry them, you'll have warning when danger approaches. The full implications of her situation were becoming clear to Sarah. She had stumbled into something much larger than a single kidnapper operating from her basement. She was now marked as a target by an entire criminal network. What am I supposed to do? She asked. I can't live in fear for the rest of my life. Joseph studied her for a long moment. There is another option. You could help me finish what I started. This network has been operating for years because no one has been willing to fight them with methods they don't expect. Sarah looked at her quiet house, then at the dark forest where ancient spirits supposedly kept watch. Her normal life had ended the moment she signed the deed to this property. The question now was what kind of life she wanted to build from the ashes of her old one. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same spot on her front porch, but everything else had changed. The house that had once felt violated and contaminated now hummed with protective energy. Wind chimes hung from every corner of the porch. Not the supernatural ones that had appeared during the confrontation with the fake agents, but real ones crafted by Joseph from materials gathered in the surrounding forest. Lisa had moved into the guest bedroom after her family became concerned about her safety. The two women had formed an unlikely partnership, united by their shared experience and the knowledge that normal law enforcement couldn't protect them from the network they had uncovered. The basement had been transformed from a place of horror into something entirely different. After the police finished their investigation and removed the crime scene tape, Sarah and Joseph had performed a cleansing ritual that involved burning sage, speaking prayers in Cherokee, and burying blessed objects at specific points around the foundation. The space now served as a meditation room where Sarah practiced the mental disciplines Joseph had been teaching her. Focus on the stone. Joseph's voice came from behind her as he joined her on the porch. Feel the connection to the land, to the spirits that protect this place. Sarah held the carved stone in her palm, concentrating on its warmth. Over the past months, she had learned to sense things she never would have believed possible before. The approach of strangers, changes in the spiritual atmosphere, even the emotional states of people around her. Someone's coming, she said without opening her eyes. Still about 2 miles away, driving slowly. Joseph nodded approvingly. What else can you tell me? Sarah extended her awareness further, using techniques that would have seemed like fantasy just a few months ago. One person, male, nervous but not hostile. He's looking for something specific but isn't sure he's in the right place. A car appeared on the distant road, confirming Sarah's perception. It was a battered pickup truck moving hesitantly down the rural highway. The driver seemed to be checking addresses or landmarks. Lisa emerged from the house carrying a laptop and a thick folder of papers. Over the past months, she had become their researcher and intelligence gatherer, using her background in data analysis to track the criminal network's activities across multiple states. I found another connection, Lisa announced, setting her materials on the porch table. Remember the real estate agent who sold you this house? His company has been involved in at least 6 other property transactions that later became crime scenes. Sarah opened her eyes, her concentration broken. So he was definitely part of the network? More than that. He's been identifying isolated properties and arranging for specific buyers, usually single women living alone. Then he provides the locations to people like Hutchins. Lisa pulled up photographs on her laptop. I've identified 12 women who bought houses through his agency in the past 3 years. 4 of them are missing. Joseph examined the information with the calm intensity Sarah had learned to associate with his planning mode. Do we know where the real estate agent is now? That's the interesting part, Lisa continued. He disappeared the same week Hutchins died. His office was cleaned out, his accounts were emptied, and his house was abandoned. But I tracked his credit card usage to a small town about 50 miles north of here. The pickup truck had turned into their driveway and was approaching slowly. Sarah could sense the driver's nervousness increasing as he got closer to the house. He's looking for help, Sarah said. her intuition providing information beyond normal perception. Something terrible happened to someone he cares about. The truck stopped in front of the house and a middle-aged man climbed out. He was dressed in work clothes and had the weathered appearance of someone who spent his life outdoors. His eyes darted nervously around the property as he approached the porch. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and worry. "I am."
How can I help you?
The man looked around at Joseph and Lisa, then back to Sarah. "My name is Tom Bradley. My daughter Emily went missing 2 weeks ago. The police aren't taking it seriously because she's 19 and they think she just ran off. But I know something bad happened to her." Sarah felt a familiar cold sensation in her stomach. "What makes you think that?" Tom pulled out his phone and showed them a photograph. This was taken 3 days before she disappeared. She was with her boyfriend at a restaurant in town. Look at the man in the background. Sarah, Joseph, and Lisa gathered around the phone screen. In the background of the photo, partially obscured by other diners, was a familiar face. The real estate agent who had sold Sarah her house. Emily had been looking at apartments, Tom continued. She wanted to move out and get her own place. She'd been working with some real estate guy who promised to help her find something affordable and safe. Joseph's expression grew grim. "Do you have any information about where she was supposed to look at properties?" "That's just it. I don't think she ever made it to any appointments. She left home that morning saying she was going to see 3 different places, but her car was found abandoned at a gas station on the highway. No witnesses, no signs of struggle." Lisa was already typing on her laptop. "What's your daughter's full name? I want to cross-reference her disappearance with known network activities." As Tom provided the information, Sarah found herself studying his face. She could sense the genuine anguish of a father desperate to find his child. But there was something else, a determination that reminded her of Joseph's intensity. "Mr. Bradley," Sarah said carefully, "how did you find out about me? Why did you come here?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "This is going to sound crazy, but I've been having dreams. The same dream every night since Emily disappeared. I see this house, this exact porch, and I hear a voice telling me that the people here can help find her." Joseph stepped forward, his interest clearly piqued. "What else do you see in these dreams?" "A woman with long dark hair chained in a basement. A Cherokee man who moves like a shadow. And always, I hear Emily calling for help from somewhere dark and cold." Sarah exchanged glances with Joseph and Lisa. Tom's dreams were too specific to be coincidence. Someone or something was guiding him to them. "Mr. Bradley," Joseph said formally, "my name is Joseph Walkingstick. These are my associates, Sarah and Lisa. We've had experience with the kind of people who may have taken your daughter." Tom's eyes widened with hope. "You'll help me find her?" "We'll do everything in our power," Joseph promised. "But I need you to understand that this isn't a normal kidnapping. The people involved are part of a larger organization, and they use methods that conventional law enforcement can't counter." Lisa looked up from her laptop with excitement. "I found something. Emily Bradley's disappearance matches the exact pattern we've been tracking. Same real estate agent contact, same type of isolated meeting location, same timeline." Sarah felt the carved stone in her pocket growing warm, a sign that significant events were approaching. "Where do we start looking?" Joseph was already moving toward his truck. "The same place we always start. We follow the spiritual trail. Emily's father is having prophetic dreams because his daughter is calling out for help through channels most people can't access." Tom hurried after them. "I don't understand what you mean by spiritual trails, but I'll try anything. The police have given up, and I won't abandon my daughter." As they prepared to leave, Sarah looked back at her house one final time. The wind chimes were moving despite the still air, creating their soft, protective melody. The spirits were active, which meant danger lay ahead. But Sarah was no longer the frightened woman who had moved here 3 months ago. She had learned to work with forces beyond normal understanding, and she had found her purpose in protecting the innocent from predators who thought themselves beyond justice. Emily Bradley was out there somewhere, probably chained in another basement, waiting for rescue that might never come through normal channels. But she wasn't going to wait alone much longer. The Cherokee hunter was coming, and this time he wouldn't be working alone. Sarah had become something new, a bridge between the modern world and ancient justice, between terrified victims and their supernatural protector. The network that had tried to make her a victim was about to discover that they had created something far more dangerous. A woman who knew their methods, understood their weaknesses, and had access to powers they couldn't comprehend or counter. As they drove into the growing darkness, Sarah gripped her carved stone and felt the presence of protective spirits surrounding them. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And somewhere in that darkness, Emily Bradley would soon learn that help was coming from directions her captors could never anticipate. The storm that had brought Sarah to this house had passed, but a new kind of storm was just beginning, one that would wash away the corruption that had poisoned these hills for far too long.